My name is Elara, and I'm 34 years old. The night I lit those candles for Mom, my brother laughed and said, "You still believe in miracles?" I didn't answer. But when he read the letter she left and whispered, "She knew what I did," my hands went cold. In that moment, I realized faith isn't about heaven. It's about the truths we hide from each other. The night I lit those candles, I wasn't expecting a miracle, just peace. When I say peace, I don't mean silence. I mean the kind of quiet that sits deep inside your bones, the kind my mother used to create just by being in the room. 6 months had passed since she took her last breath, and yet her presence clung to this house like the faint scent of her perfume, rose and amber, soft and persistent. That evening, the air was still, heavy with November's chill. I had come back to the house where we grew up, the one with peeling wallpaper and the humming refrigerator that still worked like it was running on nostalgia. It was the first anniversary of her passing, and I needed to do something, anything, to feel closer to her. So I did what she always did in times of loss. I lit candles. Mom used to say that candles carried prayers upward, like whispers of hope reaching for heaven. She believed in miracles, not the loud, flashy kind, but the quiet ones that arrive disguised as small mercies. I used to believe her. I still do, though I don't say it out loud anymore, because Marcus wouldn't understand. My brother and I have always been different. I took after Mom, patient, sentimental, maybe too trusting for my own good. Marcus was Dad's mirror image, sharp, rational, and allergic to anything that couldn't be measured or proven. After Mom died, our differences became distance. Conversations shrank to text messages. Holidays passed with polite excuses. He buried his pain under sarcasm, and I buried mine under prayer. But that night, I wanted neither sarcasm nor prayer, just stillness. I placed the old lace tablecloth across the dining table, the one Mom had embroidered when I was 10. Each tiny flower she stitched held a story. I could almost hear her humming as I smoothed out the wrinkles. The candles stood in a circle, white, unscented, simple. She always said, "Simplicity leaves room for sincerity." As I struck the first match, the faint crackle reminded me of her laugh. I lit the first candle, then the second, then the third, 6 in total, one for every month she'd been gone. The flames flickered gently, throwing long shadows across the room. I whispered a small prayer, not for miracles, but for her memory to feel less like a wound. That's when I heard the front door creak open. My stomach tightened. Only one person still had a key. "Elara?" The voice was unmistakable. Marcus. I hadn't seen him since the funeral. He stepped into the doorway, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, his expression somewhere between curiosity and disapproval. "Still clinging to Mom's fairy tales, huh?" I froze, candle in hand. For a moment I thought of blowing it out, as if extinguishing the flame would erase his tone, but instead I placed it gently in the holder. I didn't want to fight. Not tonight. "I'm just remembering her," I said softly. He scoffed. "By lighting candles? You think she's watching? That's not remembrance, Elara. That's denial." I didn't answer. Silence has a strange power. Mom taught me that too. When people expect a reaction and don't get one, they start hearing their own words more clearly. Marcus moved closer, glancing at the candles like they were foolish decorations. "You still believe in miracles?" he asked, voice dripping with disbelief. I stared at the flames, steady and calm. "Maybe," I whispered. He shook his head, pacing a little. "You know, Mom wasted years praying for miracles. What did it get her? A hospital bed and false hope." The words stung, but I stayed silent. Sometimes the most faithful act is saying nothing at all. On the corner of the table sat a small wooden box. Inside, an envelope rested among old rosary beads and a faded photo of Mom holding both of us when we were kids. The envelope was sealed with her neat handwriting. "For Elara." I hadn't touched it since the funeral. Something about it always felt sacred, like it wasn't meant to be opened until the right moment. Marcus noticed it immediately. "What's that?" "Something Mom left me," I replied quietly. He reached for it. "Left us, you mean?" "No," I said quickly. "It's addressed to me." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh, come on. She wouldn't play favorites." "Marcus, please." But he already had it in his hands. His fingers tore through the seal before I could stop him. "Let's see what kind of miracle Mom left this time." he muttered. The flames flickered as if the air itself had shifted. I wanted to snatch it back, but something inside me told me to wait. Maybe part of me was afraid of what she might have written. Marcus unfolded the letter and began to read aloud, his voice casual at first, almost mocking. But after the first line, his tone changed. His face drained of color. He stopped mid-sentence. "Marcus?" I asked softly. "What does it say?" He swallowed hard, his eyes darting across the page. Then, in a trembling voice, he read, "If you're reading this, it means you've already broken your promise to me, Marcus." For a long moment, neither of us breathed. The room felt heavier, the candlelight dimmer, as if even the air was holding its breath. Marcus lowered the letter slowly, his hands shaking. How could she have known?" he whispered. I looked at the letter, then at him. Whatever promise he'd broken, I didn't know about it. But in that instant, I could feel the shift, the moment when grief turns into something else, something deeper. Because that line, those 13 words, were the beginning of everything that followed. And though I didn't realize it then, that night, when I lit those candles, I wasn't just calling out to my mother. I was about to uncover a truth she had left buried in silence. His voice cracked when he reached her name, the same voice that once swore he'd protect her memory. For a moment, Marcus just stood there, the letter trembling in his hands. I could hear the faint hiss of the candles, the soft crackle of the wicks. The house had gone so still, it almost felt like the walls were listening. He reread the first line silently, his lips moving without sound. Then he set the letter down on the table, like it burned to touch. "Marcus," I said quietly, "what promise?" He looked at me, eyes hollow, mouth pressed tight. "It's nothing," he muttered. "Mom she wrote this when she was sick. She didn't know what she was saying." But I could tell by the way his voice faltered that he was lying. I reached for the letter, but he stopped me. "Don't," he said sharply. "It's not meant for you." My stomach knotted. "She wrote my name on the envelope, Marcus. It's meant for me." He hesitated, his shoulders tightening. Then, with a long sigh, he pushed the paper toward me. "Fine. You want to know? She made me promise something before she died. A promise I couldn't keep." He sat down heavily in one of the old dining chairs. The wood creaked under his weight, just like it used to when we were kids sneaking late-night snacks. But now the sound felt heavier, burdened. I unfolded the letter carefully, scanning the delicate handwriting. Mom's words were like her, measured, patient, full of grace. "Marcus, if you're reading this, it means your anger has returned. You once promised me that no matter what happened, you would take care of your sister and never let bitterness rule you. If you forget that promise, you will lose more than you realize." I stopped reading and looked at him. His jaw tightened, eyes fixed on the flickering flame. "She made you promise to take care of me?" I asked softly. He gave a short, bitter laugh. "Yeah, as if I ever could. You never needed me." "That's not true," I said. "I needed my brother. I still do." He looked away. "You don't understand. She made that promise sound like some divine mission, but faith didn't save her. All those nights she prayed, it didn't change the outcome. I could hear the pain, sharp and raw. It wasn't about saving her. Her faith wasn't meant to keep her alive. It was meant to keep us from falling apart." He shook his head. "You really believe that?" "Yes," I said simply, "because she believed in us." The silence that followed wasn't peaceful this time. It was thick, suffocating. I could almost feel the heat of his resentment, the guilt he carried like armor he couldn't take off. "Do! You remember the night she made you promise?" I asked. Marcus's eyes darkened. "I try not to. But I remembered it vividly. The flashback hit me like a wave. White hospital walls, the faint beeping of machines, the smell of antiseptic and fading lilies. Mom lay in the bed, her once bright hair thin and silver against the pillow. She had reached for Marcus's hand, her voice barely a whisper. "Promise me," she'd said, "you'll take care of your sister. Promise me you won't let anger be the last thing between us." Marcus had stood stiffly by her bedside, looking anywhere but her face. I could see it even now, the way his throat worked, the way he bit his lip to hold back the emotion. He finally said, "I promise." But even then it sounded forced, like a line he had to recite. I came back to the present, staring at him across the candlelight. She trusted you with that promise, Marcus. Why would you throw it away? He slammed his palm against the table. Because she was wrong, Elara. She thought faith could fix everything, but it couldn't fix Dad, it couldn't fix her, and it sure as hell couldn't fix me. His outburst made the candles quiver, shadows dancing across the walls. I didn't flinch. I just said softly, "You're right. Faith didn't fix any of that. But it kept her from hating the world for taking everything she loved. That's what faith did." He stared at me, breathing hard, eyes glistening. Then he looked down at the letter again, scanning the rest of the page, but I noticed something. He stopped halfway through. "Marcus," I said carefully, "you didn't finish reading it." He folded it abruptly. "It's nothing important." "Let me see." "No. Please." He clenched his jaw. "It's not worth it." Mom's words are always worth it. Something in my tone must have reached him, because his hand trembled as he passed the letter back to me. I unfolded it slowly and read the lines he'd skipped. "Marcus, your sister carries more of me than you realize. There are things I never told you, things I only entrusted to her. If she shows you this letter, it means the time has come for her to reveal the truth I couldn't say aloud." My heart stopped for a moment. "The truth I couldn't say aloud," I whispered. Marcus looked up, confused. "What truth?" I shook my head, reading the final lines silently, my pulse quickening. "Elara, if he has broken his promise, it is because he doesn't yet understand what I protected him from. You must show him the truth I couldn't say aloud, before it's too late." I stared at those words, the room spinning around me. What had she protected him from? When I looked up, Marcus was watching me closely, suspicion flickering behind his eyes. "What did she write?" he asked, his tone tight, almost fearful. I folded the letter gently, keeping my hand over the last paragraph. She wanted us to understand each other," I said, my voice shaking. But inside, something told me this was bigger, much bigger, than just a lesson in forgiveness. Whatever truth our mother had buried, it was meant to stay hidden until this exact moment. And now that it had surfaced, I could feel the ground shifting beneath us. Because when she wrote "before it's too late," I knew she didn't mean time. She meant something else, something we hadn't yet uncovered. You must show him the truth I couldn't say aloud before it's too late. My hands trembled as I realized Mom had kept a secret from Marcus his entire life. I must have read that line a dozen times, hoping the meaning would somehow change. But it didn't. You must show him the truth I couldn't say aloud before it's too late. I turned the page over, my fingers shaking, and there it was, a small handwritten note beneath her closing signature, an address, and a date. The date was burned into my memory the instant I saw it, 15 years ago. The same night Marcus walked out of this house and never looked back. My throat tightened. That night had left scars we never spoke about. I still remember the sound of it, the shouting, the slammed door, the storm outside mirroring the storm inside our family. Dad had been drinking again. Marcus, already old enough to move out, confronted him about something. I didn't hear every word, but I heard the crash of glass and Mom's cry as she tried to pull them apart. And then he was gone. For years afterward, Marcus blamed Dad for everything. But I always suspected there was more to the story, something unspoken between them. I looked up from the letter. Marcus was pacing near the window, his back to me. "What's that?" he asked, noticing the paper trembling in my hands. "An address," I said softly. "And a date? 15 years ago." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I think, Mom went somewhere that night. Somewhere she never told us about." He gave a bitter laugh. "Oh, come on. You really think she was hiding some grand secret? Maybe she just went to pray, Elara. You know how she was." I ignored the sting in his tone. "The letter says I'm supposed to go there if you ever forgot your promise." "Then don't," he snapped. "This is ridiculous. She's been gone 6 months, and she's still pulling strings from the grave." "She's not manipulating us," I said, my voice rising. "She's trying to help you." "Help me?" He barked out a humorless laugh. "You think dragging up old ghosts is help?" I stood, anger finally breaking through my calm. "She loved you, Marcus. Even when you couldn't love yourself. She left that letter because she knew you'd need it." He turned toward me, eyes burning. Don't talk to me about what she knew. She didn't know what it was like watching her fade away, begging for miracles that never came. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. She did know. She just never let you see it. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or regret. But just as quickly, it vanished. He grabbed his jacket from the chair. I'm done. Believe whatever you want, Elara, but I'm not following a dead woman's breadcrumbs. And with that, he stormed out, the front door slamming hard enough to make the candles waver. I stood there, staring at the closed door, the sound echoing through the empty house. The letter lay open on the table, edges curling near the candlelight. I reached for it just as a stray spark from the match fell, grazing the corner. For a split second, flame caught paper, and my heart stopped. I smothered it with my hand, hissing as the heat bit my skin. When I lifted it again, the page was singed, half burned, but the address remained clear enough to read. I stared at it for a long time before whispering the words aloud. St. Bartholomew's Chapel. I had never heard of it before, but something in my gut told me I needed to go. The next afternoon, I drove out of town, following winding roads that twisted through the outskirts, past empty fields and rusted fences. The further I went, the quieter everything became, until the hum of the world faded into stillness. When I finally found it, the chapel was smaller than I'd imagined, white paint peeling, ivy curling up its stone walls, and a crooked wooden cross leaning slightly under the weight of time. Yet, despite its age, there was something peaceful about it, like the air itself carried a blessing. I parked near the entrance and stepped out. The late sunlight cast long golden beams across the churchyard. A few candles flickered inside the stained glass windows. My heartbeat matched their rhythm. Inside, the scent of wax and old wood filled my lungs. Rows of benches lined the narrow aisle, and at the front stood a modest altar covered in simple white cloth. I noticed several candle holders, each one burned down to stubs. I approached the altar and hesitated. "Excuse me," came a gentle voice behind me. I turned to see an elderly priest standing by the doorway. His robes were faded, and his kind eyes crinkled when he smiled. "Forgive me," I said softly. "I didn't mean to intrude. I was just—" He raised a hand. "You must be Elara." My breath caught. "How do you know my name?" The priest's smile deepened. "You look just like her." I felt my knees weaken slightly. "You knew my mother?" He nodded. "She used to come here often, every Sunday evening. She said this place brought her peace when home did not." I swallowed hard. She never told us about this." "She wouldn't have," he said gently. "She didn't want to burden you or your brother. But she prayed for you both every time she came." I stared at the flickering candles, realizing she must have stood in this very spot, whispering the same prayers I did at her table. The priest moved closer to the altar and gestured toward a small box tucked beneath it. "She left something here for you." My pulse quickened. "For me?" He shook his head. "No," he said softly, "for your brother." He lifted the box carefully and opened it. Inside was an envelope, yellowed with time, sealed with wax that bore a small cross. Written in her looping handwriting were two words that made my breath hitch. "For Marcus." I reached out, my fingertips trembling as I touched it. "She asked me to give it to you when the time was right," the priest said. "I believe that time is now." The room felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. I clutched the letter as if it were the last piece of her I'd ever hold. "What's in it?" I whispered. He looked at me with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of knowing too much. Only the truth she couldn't say aloud. The priest handed me the sealed envelope, this one marked for Marcus. I didn't know whether to call him or keep the secret, because I feared what it might say. I sat in one of the chapel pews, the letter trembling in my lap. The candlelight wavered across the wax seal, turning it gold, then red, then soft again. The name Marcus seemed to glow in the dim light, accusing and fragile all at once. For the first time, I didn't know what to do. Should I call him? Should I open it? Mom had trusted me with this, but the letter wasn't mine. It was meant for him. And yet something deep inside whispered that I needed to know what it said. My heart pulled in two directions, loyalty and fear. The priest had left quietly, giving me privacy. The silence pressed in, thick and almost holy. My fingers traced the wax seal over and over, feeling the ridges of the small cross. My conscience argued with itself. You can't read it. It's his. But what if it's something he needs to hear, and he won't come? I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. Memories crept in, uninvited and sharp. When I was 9 and Marcus was 14, a group of older boys used to tease me after school. They'd pull my backpack straps, call me church girl, and laugh when I cried. One afternoon, Marcus showed up out of nowhere. I can still see him standing between me and those boys, his fists clenched, jaw set. "You don't touch my sister," he'd said, his voice shaking with fury. They never bothered me again. That was Marcus, the protector, the boy who built pillow forts with me when Dad yelled downstairs, the brother who shielded me from things I didn't understand, until he grew older and something in him cracked. After that, the protector became the one who needed protecting. From himself, from the anger that ate him alive. I stared at the envelope, feeling that same ache I used to feel watching him walk away. Finally, I pulled my phone from my bag and dialed his number. 1 ring, 2, 3, voicemail. His recorded voice, distant and cold. "Leave a message." I hung up. I couldn't bring myself to speak to the void. The letter waited in my hands, patient and unbearable. "I'm sorry, Mom," I whispered, "but I can't wait for him to come back." I broke the seal. The wax cracked softly, like a sigh escaping from the past. Inside, the paper was aged, its edges slightly yellowed. Her handwriting was steady, deliberate. I could almost hear her voice as I began to read aloud, my whisper echoing off the chapel's old walls. "My dearest Marcus, if you are holding this letter, it means the weight you carry has not lifted. I know what lives in your heart, my son. I know because I saw it that night." I paused, feeling a cold shiver crawl down my spine. That night, the same one from 15 years ago. You have punished yourself for something that was never your fault. You've built walls out of guilt, thinking that if you hate yourself enough, you can protect others from being hurt by you. But Marcus, that is not what I wanted for you. My breath hitched. She knew. She'd always known. I never told you the full truth about your father's last night. You believed your anger killed him. You believed the words you shouted pushed him to his heart attack. But it wasn't your anger, my love. It was mine. I froze. The candle beside me sputtered, almost as if reacting to the words. That night, after you stormed out, I confronted him. He'd been drinking again. I told him he had broken this family for the last time. I said words I can never take back. His chest hurt then, and I thought he was faking it to make me feel guilty. By the time I realized it wasn't an act, it was too late. My hand flew to my mouth. I could see it, the scene she described, the shouting, the heartbreak, the silence after. You blamed yourself all these years, but it wasn't your fight that ended his life. It was mine. You were just a boy carrying a man's burden, and I let you carry it because I was too ashamed to tell you the truth. Tears blurred the ink. My mother, gentle, forgiving, endlessly kind, had lived with this guilt, and she'd let Marcus believe he was the cause. To protect him, or because she couldn't face him, maybe both. I need you to forgive yourself, Marcus. I need you to forgive me too. Because holding on to pain isn't loyalty. It's a slow kind of dying. If you ever doubt that miracles exist, remember this. Forgiveness is the only miracle that doesn't need proof. The final words bled into silence. I sat there, the letter trembling in my hands, my chest aching with the weight of her confession. I whispered, "Oh, Mom, what did you do?" The chapel felt alive with her presence. The flickering candles painted her memories on every wall. I imagined her sitting right there on this same bench, whispering prayers for both of us, lighting flame after flame for the forgiveness she never found in life. The truth struck me like thunder. The miracle Mom spoke of wasn't something divine or distant. It was human. It was the fragile courage it takes to forgive the unforgivable. Marcus had spent 15 years trapped in guilt for a death that wasn't his fault, and Mom had spent 15 years drowning in hers. And now somehow it was up to me to break that chain. I folded the letter carefully, clutching it to my chest. I wanted to call him again, to tell him everything, to make him understand that he was innocent, that he had always been loved. But I couldn't. Not yet. He wouldn't believe me over his own shame. I needed to show him, not just tell him. I blew out one of the candles and whispered, "You were right, Mom. Miracles aren't seen. They're felt." The sound of the flame dying out echoed faintly through the chapel. For a moment, everything was still again, peaceful. And then a sound broke through the silence. A car door, slamming shut. My heart jumped. Someone was here. The echo carried through the stone walls, sharp and sudden, like a memory coming back to life. I turned toward the door, my pulse racing. Was it him? Elara hears a car door slam outside, the echo of someone coming back. When Marcus walked through the chapel doors, his eyes looked haunted, like he'd seen her ghost. The sound of footsteps echoed through the chapel before I even turned around. Heavy, hesitant, the way a person walks when they're not sure they belong somewhere. I knew that rhythm. I had heard it pacing outside my childhood bedroom door more times than I could count. When Marcus walked through those chapel doors, his eyes looked haunted, like he'd seen her ghost, and maybe, in some way, he had. He stood in the doorway, framed by dim afternoon light, rain-speckled and breathless. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us stretched wide, filled only by the faint hiss of candle flames. I swallowed, clutching the letter against my chest. "You came," I whispered. He nodded slowly, his gaze drifting across the room, to the altar, the candles, the faint smell of wax and roses. "I thought you were crazy," he muttered. "Driving out here, chasing whatever message she left. But when I got home and saw the candlelight still flickering in the window, I couldn't ignore it." I gestured for him to sit. He hesitated, then crossed the chapel, his footsteps echoing softly. When he sat down beside me, I noticed his hands were trembling. "What is this place?" he asked quietly. "St. Bartholomew's Chapel," I said. "Mom used to come here every week." He looked up sharply. "She never told me." "She didn't tell either of us, but she left something here for you." I unfolded the letter carefully, sliding it from my bag. The sight of his name on the envelope made him flinch. "She wrote it 15 years ago," I said. "The priest kept it safe until now." He stared at the envelope for a long time, then whispered, "Why would she leave something for me here?" "Maybe because she knew you'd never listen to her while she was alive," I said softly. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "And what makes you think I'll listen now?" "Because she's not asking this time," I said. "She's telling." I offered him the letter. He didn't take it. His hand stayed clenched in his lap, his eyes fixed on the flickering flames at the altar. "Read it," he said finally. "I don't think I can." So I did. I broke the seal again and began reading her words aloud, my voice echoing faintly in the empty chapel. "My dearest Marcus, if you are holding this letter, it means the weight you carry has not lifted. I know what lives in your heart, my son. I know because I saw it that night." His face tightened as I read. When I reached the part about the fight, the night that had haunted him for 15 years, his hands began to shake harder. "You believed your anger killed him. You believed the words you shouted pushed him to his heart attack. But it wasn't your anger, my love. It was mine." He let out a low, strangled sound, somewhere between a sob and a laugh. His head dropped into his hands. "Stop," he whispered. "Please, Elara, stop." But I kept reading, because I knew he needed to hear every word. That night, after you left, I confronted him. I said words I can never take back. By the time I realized it wasn't an act, it was too late. Marcus made a broken noise and turned away from me. "She knew," he said hoarsely. "All these years. She knew I blamed myself, and she said nothing?" "She said nothing because she wanted you to heal," I said, my voice trembling. "She thought if she told you, you'd never forgive her, and she couldn't bear that." He looked up at me, his eyes glassy with disbelief. "She let me hate myself, Elara." "She let you grieve in your own way," I whispered. "And maybe she hoped one day you'd forgive her without needing the truth." He gave a bitter laugh through tears. "She always believed in miracles. Maybe that was the biggest one she hoped for." He leaned back against the pew, wiping his face roughly with his sleeve. It had been years since I'd seen him cry. The last time was the night Mom went into hospice. He'd hidden in his truck, pretending to fix something while I sat inside holding her hand. When I went out to find him, he was sitting there, head on the steering wheel, shoulders shaking. He'd sworn then he wouldn't cry again. But now, the tears came freely. "She forgave me," he whispered, almost to himself. "She forgave me even after everything." I reached out and placed my hand over his. "She never needed to forgive you, Marcus. You didn't do anything wrong." He looked at me then, really looked at me. The anger in his eyes was gone, replaced by something softer, something that looked a lot like surrender. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The candles burned quietly, their flames steady and tall. Finally, I said, "Mom always said miracles weren't about fixing what's broken. They were about hearts mended in silence." He let out a long breath, shaky and uneven. Maybe she was right. The air in the chapel seemed to shift, as if the space itself exhaled. The candles flickered all at once, light bending like something unseen had brushed past us. Marcus glanced at the altar, eyes wide. "Did you see that?" I nodded slowly. "Maybe she's here." He stared at the candles for a long time, his expression caught between awe and disbelief. "Maybe this is the miracle she meant," he whispered. We sat there together, surrounded by the faint glow of the flames and the echo of her words still hanging between us. For the first time since her death, I didn't feel the emptiness pressing down on me. Instead, I felt her, in the warmth of the candlelight, in the silence that no longer hurt. Marcus took a deep breath and turned toward me. "Elara," he said quietly. "Yeah?" He hesitated. "There's still one more thing you don't know." The weight in his voice made my stomach tighten. I turned toward him fully. "What do you mean?" His gaze dropped to the floor. "That night, before I left, Dad said something I've never told anyone." I felt my pulse quicken. "What did he say, Marcus?" He looked up, eyes dark and glistening, and just like that, I realized the truth wasn't done revealing itself. He looks up and says, "But there's still one more thing you don't know." His voice shook as he began to tell me what really happened that night. For a long moment, Marcus didn't speak. His eyes were fixed on the flickering candlelight, his face pale, the weight of years pressing down on his shoulders. The air in the chapel felt dense, almost sacred, like it was holding its breath for whatever he was about to say. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "Elara, there's something I've never told anyone. Not you, not Mom, no one." I waited, afraid even to breathe too loud. He took a shaky breath. "That night, 15 years ago, I wasn't just leaving home. I was leaving for good." My chest tightened. "You mean you weren't planning to come back?" He shook his head slowly. "No, I'd packed everything. I had a friend waiting to take me to the city. I was done with Dad, done with everything. But before I left, he came home, drunk, angry. He started yelling about money, about responsibility, about how I'd never be the man he was." Marcus's voice trembled as he rubbed his palms together. "I lost it, Elara. I said things I didn't mean. Ugly things. I told him I hated him, that I wished he'd just disappear." I felt my throat tighten. "He laughed," Marcus went on quietly. "That cruel kind of laugh he used when he wanted to make you feel small. So I pushed him, just once. Not hard, but enough to make him stumble. He caught. Himself glared at me and said, 'One day you'll understand what you just destroyed.'" Marcus's voice broke on the word destroyed. "Then he went upstairs, and I left," he whispered. "I didn't even look back." The silence that followed felt unbearable. "When Mom called me hours later," he continued, "I was already halfway to the city. I saw her number flash on my phone, but I didn't answer. I thought she'd just want to scold me, to guilt me into coming home. I ignored every call until morning. When I finally picked up, the first thing she said was, 'He's gone.'" Tears welled in his eyes. "She said it was a heart attack, but I knew. I knew it was me. My words, my anger, my selfishness, that was the last thing he ever heard." He turned to me, eyes wet, voice hollow. "That's why I could never face you. I couldn't stand knowing I took him from both of us." "Marcus," I whispered, reaching for his hand. He pulled it back, shaking his head violently. "Don't. You don't get it. You were the good one. You prayed. You stayed. I ran, and I left you to pick up the pieces." His voice cracked again. "You know what's worse. I used to drive by the house sometimes. Late at night, when I couldn't sleep. I'd park down the street, just far enough so you wouldn't notice. I'd see your bedroom light on, you sitting there reading or writing, and I'd tell myself, she's okay. She doesn't need me." My heart broke right there. All those nights I thought I was alone, but he had been out there, watching over me in silence. I swallowed hard, my own eyes filling. "You were wrong," I said softly. "I did need you. I needed my brother." He looked away, his jaw trembling. "You shouldn't forgive me." "But I do." He blinked, stunned. "You can't. You don't even know." "I do," I interrupted. "You hurt, you ran, and you carried guilt because you thought you were protecting me from it. But forgiveness isn't deserved, Marcus. It's given. Freely. Because if we wait for people to earn it, none of us would ever heal." The chapel was silent again, except for the faint hum of the wind outside. He let out a shaky breath, tears spilling down his cheek. For the first time in years, my brother wept openly, his sobs raw, almost childlike. I reached over and pulled him into my arms. He resisted for a moment, then collapsed against me. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for leaving, for everything." I held him tighter. "I know, and I forgive you. Mom would too." He buried his face in his hands, voice breaking. "She was right, wasn't she?" "About what?" He looked up, eyes glistening. "That miracles aren't found. They're made." I smiled through my tears. "Yes, Marcus. They're made by people like us. People who decide to forgive, even when it hurts." The candlelight shimmered around us, as if the flames themselves were breathing in unison. The warmth spread through the chapel, wrapping around us like unseen arms. Without speaking, Marcus reached for one of the half-burned candles on the altar and handed it to me. I struck a match, my fingers still trembling, and lit the wick. We watched the flame come to life, steady and sure. Then Marcus lit another candle beside it, and another. Together, we relit every candle our mother once prayed beneath. When the last one was burning, we knelt side by side, the glow painting our faces in soft gold. Neither of us prayed aloud, but I knew we were both speaking to her in our own way, thanking her, forgiving her, asking for forgiveness ourselves. The sound of the chapel door creaking open startled us both. We turned, expecting the wind, but it wasn't the wind. The old priest stepped quietly inside, his robes whispering against the floor. He looked at us for a long moment, a faint smile softening his weathered face. "I see you found what she left behind," he said gently. Marcus wiped his face, embarrassed. "You knew about this?" The priest nodded. "I knew she prayed for it. Every week she'd come here and light these same candles. She asked God to bring you both back together one day. She said that would be her miracle." I swallowed hard, unable to speak. The priest stepped closer, his gaze kind and steady. "It seems her prayer was finally answered." Marcus and I exchanged a look, one that carried both pain and peace. For the first time, it felt like the ghost between us had finally been laid to rest. But before I could say anything, the priest added quietly, "There's one final message she left for both of you." My heart skipped a beat. "Another message?" He nodded slowly, reaching into his pocket. "She told me to give it to you only when both of you were here together." Marcus and I looked at each other, the candlelight reflecting in his tear-streaked eyes. Whatever this last message was, I could feel it. It wasn't just another secret. It was the end of something, or maybe the beginning. The priest adds, "There's one final message she left for both of you." The old priest placed a weathered cassette tape in my hand, my mother's voice, waiting one last time. The priest's hand trembled slightly as he reached into the folds of his robe. From the pocket, he pulled out a small, dust-covered cassette tape, sealed inside a cracked plastic case. Time had yellowed the label, but her handwriting was unmistakable. Soft loops, careful letters, each one shaped with the kind of patience she had always carried. On the label, in faded ink, were the words, "For Elara and Marcus." My breath caught. I could barely bring myself to touch it. The priest smiled gently, placing it in my hand. "She left this the same week she gave me Marcus's letter. Said it was only to be played when the two of you were here. Together." Marcus stared at the cassette as though it might disappear. His voice was barely a whisper. I didn't even know she owned a recorder. She borrowed mine, the priest said softly. She told me she didn't trust her memory, but she trusted her voice. For a moment, the three of us stood in silence, the air thick with anticipation and grief. Then, with a nod from Marcus, the priest walked over to the corner of the chapel, where an old player sat on a wooden shelf. He blew the dust off it, the sound echoing faintly in the stillness. I clutched Marcus's hand without realizing it. When the tape clicked into place, I felt my heart begin to race. Then, static, a faint hiss, and then her voice. Hello, my loves. Marcus let out a small broken sound, and I pressed my fingers to my lips. Even through the low hum of the recording, her voice was unmistakable, soft, warm, steady. The kind of voice that could calm storms. If you're hearing this, she continued, it means I've already gone where I can't follow your steps anymore, and that's all right, because the two of you were never meant to walk alone. Tears blurred my vision instantly. I don't know what brought you here, but if you're together, that means one of my prayers was answered. I prayed you'd find your way back to each other. I prayed you'd remember that love is louder than grief and stronger than guilt. I glanced at Marcus. His eyes were closed, tears streaking silently down his cheeks. Mom's voice carried on, steady but tinged with the exhaustion she'd hidden from us near the end. I was afraid, you know, not of dying, but of leaving you divided. I used to lie awake at night, listening to you both breathing down the hall, thinking, please, let them never forget each other. She laughed faintly through the recording. Funny thing about prayers, sometimes they don't work right away. Sometimes they take years. But I see now. That's because the heart takes time to heal before it can recognize grace. Marcus's grip on my hand tightened. He whispered, she knew. Yes, I murmured, voice trembling. She always knew. Her voice softened, a mother's tone again. Marcus, my darling boy, I know you've carried guilt that was never yours. I know you thought your anger ended your father's life, but anger doesn't kill my son. Silence does. The silence we choose instead of forgiveness. You have punished yourself long enough. Lay it down now. He bent forward, pressing his forehead to our joined hands, his shoulders shaking. And Elara, she said next. I froze. Hearing her say my name after so long felt like a thread being pulled through time itself. You've spent your life keeping faith alive for everyone else. You thought that meant never doubting, never questioning. But faith isn't about being sure. It's about holding light when all you can see is dark. You kept that light for me, for your brother, for this family. Don't let it burn out. I bit down on a sob, my tears falling freely. Her voice paused, then grew softer, like a whisper carried by candlelight. I want you both to listen carefully. Light the candles, and you'll find me in every flame. Not in heaven, not in prayers, not in places, but here, between you, in forgiveness, in the space where love is still possible. For a moment, the only sound in the chapel was our mother's recorded breath, soft, shallow, then steady again. Forgive each other, she said. Live gently, and know that every miracle I ever prayed for came true the moment you walked through those doors together. Then came silence. Marcus let go of my hand and stood, pacing a few steps away. He pressed his fingers to his eyes, whispering something I couldn't quite hear. When he finally turned back, his face was wet, but his expression was lighter, like the boy I remembered. She really thought this would bring us back, he said quietly. It did, I replied. He laughed softly through his tears. All these years, I thought she was trying to make me believe in God again. I tilted my head. And now? He looked around the chapel, the candles, the altar, the worn wooden benches. Now I think she was trying to make me believe in us. Something inside me cracked open at that. The priest, still standing near the player, smiled faintly. Faith takes many forms, Marcus. Some find it in prayer, others find it in love, but it's all the same light. Marcus walked back toward the altar, his steps slow and reverent. One by one, he lit each candle again, his movements steady. The flames flickered brighter than before, as if the room itself breathed life into them. I joined him, lighting the last candle in the row. Together, we stood in the soft glow, two lost souls finding warmth again in the simplest of acts. The candles burned steady and tall, their light dancing across the walls. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw her shadow between ours. Just a faint outline, smiling. She was right, Marcus whispered. Faith wasn't about religion for her. It was about connection. I nodded, tears still falling. This was her miracle. And as if responding, the candles flickered all at once, stronger, brighter, filling the chapel with a golden warmth that wrapped around us like an embrace. For the first time since her death, I felt peace instead of pain, love instead of loss. The tape ended with a soft click, and then, just as the sound faded, we both heard it. A faint knock on the chapel door. Slow, deliberate. Marcus and I looked at each other, hearts pounding. The priest turned toward the entrance, eyes narrowing slightly. "Are you expecting someone?" Marcus whispered. I shook my head. "No." The knock came again. Two soft raps that echoed through the candlelit silence. The flames quivered. Marcus stepped closer to me, his hand brushing mine. "Maybe," I whispered, barely daring to breathe. It's another miracle. The cassette clicks off, and a faint knock sounds on the chapel door. Neither of us moved. The knock came again, slow, deliberate, impossible. For a heartbeat, everything in the chapel froze. The candles burned tall and silent, their light reflected in Marcus's wide eyes. We both stared at the door, waiting, listening. The knock came again. Slow, deliberate, impossible. I felt my pulse climb into my throat. "Who would come here? It's nearly midnight," I whispered. Marcus didn't answer. He took a careful step toward the entrance, his shoes scraping against the old tile. The priest watched quietly from near the altar, his face unreadable, his eyes full of the calm that comes from having seen things that defy explanation. Another knock. 3 this time, soft, steady, patient. Marcus looked back at me once before reaching for the handle. "Stay here," he murmured. I didn't. I followed. The door creaked open, letting in a wave of cool night air that carried the faint scent of rain and pine. At first, I saw nothing but darkness outside. Then, out of the shadows, a small figure stepped forward. A little girl. She couldn't have been more than 9 or 10. She wore a pale yellow coat, buttoned up to her chin, her dark curls damp from the drizzle. In her hands, she held a small bouquet of white lilies tied together with a blue ribbon. Marcus blinked, caught completely off guard. "Can I help you?" he asked softly. The girl looked up, her eyes bright and sincere. "I was told to bring these here," she said. "They're for the woman who believed in miracles." The words hit me like a wave. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. Marcus crouched down, trying to meet her gaze. "Who told you to bring them?" She shook her head. "I don't know. A nice lady stopped me near the crossroads. She said she couldn't come herself, but that I should leave these here tonight. She gave me a few dollars and said, 'Tell them she still believes.'" My hands trembled. "The lilies, my mother's favorite flowers. She used to say they were the flowers of peace, symbols of purity and rebirth. Every Sunday, she'd bring a handful to church and place them beside the candles." I took the bouquet from the girl gently, my fingers brushing against the ribbon. It was the same shade of blue as my mother's old prayer book cover. "Thank you," I said softly. "You did something very kind tonight." The girl smiled. "She said it would make someone happy." "It did," Marcus said quietly, his voice breaking just a little. The priest stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. "Would you like me to walk you home, child?" She nodded, her eyes shining. "Yes, please. My house is close." Before they left, the girl turned back to us. "She told me to tell you something else." We both froze. "What?" I asked. She said, "Light the candles. I'm always near." My throat closed. Marcus's hand tightened around mine. The priest smiled faintly, as though unsurprised. "Go on," he said to her gently. "Your message was delivered." She nodded and slipped her small hand into his. Together, they disappeared into the night. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Marcus and me standing there in stunned silence, the bouquet trembling slightly in my grip. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, Marcus exhaled, his voice barely above a whisper. Maybe she did find a way to reach us. I set the lilies down near the altar. Their pale petals glowed softly in the candlelight, casting faint golden shadows on the walls. The scent of them filled the air, fresh, sweet, familiar. Marcus knelt beside me, watching the flames flicker. "Do you think that girl was real?" I smiled faintly through my tears. "Does it matter?" He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No, I guess not." We sat there together in front of the altar side by side, the way we used to sit on the porch steps as kids, sharing secrets we thought the world would never understand. My eyes wandered up toward the wall behind the candles, and then I saw it. A reflection, not from the candles themselves, but from something leaning against the wall, half hidden beneath the altar cloth. I reached out and carefully pulled it free. It was an old photo frame, the glass dusty and cracked, but the picture inside perfectly preserved. It was us. Mom, Dad, Marcus, and me, smiling in the backyard. The photo had been taken the summer before everything fell apart. Mom's arms wrapped around both of us. Marcus mid-laugh, my hair sticking up in the wind. I ran my fingers along the frame, my heart aching and healing all at once. "She kept this here," I whispered, "all this time." Marcus leaned closer, tracing Dad's face with his eyes. "It's like she knew we'd find it one day." "She did," I said softly. "She believed in things we couldn't see. And now, I think I finally understand why." We placed the photo beside the lilies and sat back, watching the candlelight dance across the faces frozen in time. Marcus broke the silence first. "Elara?" "Yeah?" He hesitated, then smiled. Small, honest, a little uncertain. "I want to come home." The words hung in the air like a promise. I turned to him, my vision blurring again. "You mean that?" He nodded. "I'm tired of running. I want to fix what's left. Mom's house, our family, us." A lump rose in my throat. "Then come home." He exhaled, his shoulders loosening for the first time in years. "If you'll have me." I laughed softly through my tears. "Always." We sat there in the quiet glow, the scent of lilies surrounding us, the photo watching over like a silent blessing. Then, without warning, a soft gust of wind swept through the chapel. The door didn't move. The windows stayed closed. Yet, the air shifted, gentle, purposeful. One by one, the candles flickered out. Each flame bowed gracefully before fading into smoke until only one remained. The very first candle I had lit that night. The same one that had burned steadily through every confession, every tear, every truth. Marcus stared at it, awe softening his face. "Why that one?" I smiled faintly, because that was Mom's candle. We watched it glow, unwavering, its light steady against the dark. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of love, forgiveness, and the quiet echo of a woman who had believed in miracles until her last breath. I whispered, "Welcome back, Marcus." He smiled, tears shining in his eyes. "It feels like home again." And for the first time in 15 years, it did. A soft gust extinguishes all but one candle, the one Elara lit first. That single flame stayed alive through the night, like a promise reborn. The candle burned long after we left the chapel that night. When I came back the next morning, the wax had melted into a perfect circle, and the wick stood upright, untouched by the wind that had taken all the others. That single flame had refused to die, as if some invisible hand had guarded it through the dark. I stood there for a long while, just watching the faint curl of smoke rise from its remains, feeling a peace I hadn't known in years. It was strange, how something so small, so fragile, could hold the weight of everything we'd lost and everything we'd found again. That day marked the beginning of something new. Not a miracle in the way my mother used to describe it, not some divine intervention or heavenly sign, but something quieter, deeper, a healing. Marcus came home that weekend. At first it felt strange, like we were both learning to breathe the same air again. He stood in the doorway of Mom's old house, his hands in his pockets, staring at the walls like they were museum pieces from a life he'd once lived. The furniture was still the same. The embroidered tablecloth, the porcelain teapot, the faded curtains that caught the morning sun. "This place feels smaller," he said quietly. "It hasn't changed," I told him. "We did." He smiled faintly and nodded, and for the first time in years, he walked all the way in. The next few days were filled with dust and laughter, two things that hadn't shared a space here in a long time. We cleaned, repaired, repainted. Marcus fixed the creaking floorboard in the hallway that Mom used to complain about. I found her old recipe book tucked behind the bread box, still stained with flour from the time she'd taught me to bake. Every night, before we closed the windows and locked the doors, Marcus would light a single candle on the dining table, the same spot where I'd started this journey. At first, he said it was just to keep her company, but over time, it became his ritual. One morning, I came downstairs to find him sitting. At the table before sunrise, a steaming cup of coffee beside him, the candle already lit. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked. He shook his head, his eyes on the flame. "I don't know. I just like it. It's quiet, makes me feel close to her." I smiled. That's how she felt, too. He didn't answer, but the faint upward curve of his mouth said enough. Weeks passed. Word spread through town that the old house on Maple Ridge was alive again. Neighbors began stopping by, first out of curiosity, then out of habit. Mrs. Hargrove from next door brought a basket of fresh bread. A young couple from down the street came one afternoon, asking if they could borrow Mom's garden tools because theirs had rusted. Soon, our kitchen table became a gathering spot. People came to talk, to share stories, to ask for advice or comfort. It wasn't intentional. It just happened. Marcus joked one evening, "We've turned Mom's house into a confessional." "Maybe that's what she wanted," I said. He leaned back, smiling. "She always did like helping everyone else before herself. And so, we kept her legacy alive in the most natural way we knew. Through kindness, through presence, through listening. Every Sunday evening, we'd light the candles again, the same way she used to. Marcus always lit the first one. He said it reminded him of his promise, to never let bitterness rule him again. We called those evenings the light hour. It started with just the two of us, but over time, more people joined. Friends, neighbors, even strangers who'd heard about the miracle house on the hill. They'd bring their worries, their grief, their stories. We'd listen, laugh, sometimes cry, and each time a candle flickered to life, I felt the weight of my mother's faith lingering in the room, quiet and steady. One night, after everyone had gone, Marcus and I sat on the porch with mugs of cocoa, the scent of wax and lilies drifting through the open window. He looked up at the stars and said, "You know, I used to think miracles were things that happened to other people, things you saw on the news, things you prayed for but never got. And now?" I asked. He smiled, the faint glow from the house behind him lighting his face. "Now I think miracles are just moments when love shows up, when it shouldn't have been able to." I stared at him for a long moment, my chest tight with emotion. "You sound like her." He chuckled softly. "Guess she finally rubbed off on me." We sat there in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes after forgiveness. The cicadas hummed, the night air warm and kind, and through the open window, the candle's flame swayed gently, alive, enduring. Months passed, but that flame never left our lives. Every morning, one of us lit it. Every night, one of us blew it out. It became more than a symbol. It became a promise to keep faith, a promise to choose love, a promise to never let silence win again. And as seasons changed, the house began to change too. The laughter returned to its walls. The echoes of grief faded, replaced by music, conversation, the smell of cooking, the sound of life. People began calling our mother's home the House of Light. Marcus thought it was cheesy. I thought it was perfect. Because that's what she gave us, not just a home, but light. Forgiveness didn't erase the past, it transformed it. The pain didn't disappear. It bloomed into peace. One evening, nearly a year after that night in the chapel, Marcus and I sat in the living room together, the same spot where everything had begun. The soft hum of the radio played in the background. The candle flickered between us, steady and unwavering. I watched the flame dance, its light reflecting in Marcus's eyes. He caught me staring and smiled. "What?" "Nothing," I said. "Just thinking." "About what?" "How far we've come since that night," I murmured, "when you asked me if I still believed in miracles." He chuckled quietly. "And now?" "Now," I said, smiling, "I don't just believe in them. I live one." He nodded, his gaze falling to the candle. "You know, I think she's still here." "I know she is." We sat there in silence, watching the little flame burn with quiet strength. I leaned back, my voice barely a whisper. "Mom, we're okay now." The candle flickered once, then steadied, as if in answer. And in that moment, I understood everything she had ever tried to teach us. Miracles weren't thunderous or divine. They were born in forgiveness, in love that refused to die, in light that kept burning even when the world went dark. The house was quiet, peaceful. The air smelled faintly of wax and lilies. I looked at the flame one last time, its glow soft and sure, and smiled. "When I lit those candles," I whispered, "I asked for a miracle." I reached across the table, took Marcus's hand in mine, and finished softly. What I got was my brother back. That last candle still burns on our kitchen table, steady, warm, alive. Sometimes Marcus lights it, sometimes I do, but it never truly goes out. It reminds us that faith isn't about what you see, it's about what you choose to keep alive inside you. In losing Mom, we found forgiveness, and maybe that was her miracle all along. If this story touched your heart, keep its light alive. Share it with someone who still believes in second chances. And if you felt the warmth of that last candle, don't forget to leave a little love behind. Every like, every share, every new face keeps these stories glowing. Tell me, if you could ask your loved one for one miracle today, what would it be?